Chapter 1 of Tom Swift and His Sky Racer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Tom Swift and His Sky Racer by Victor Appleton. Chapter 1. The Prize Offer. Is this Tom Swift, the inventor of several airships? The man who had rung the bell glanced at the youth who answered his summons. "Yes, I'm Tom Swift," was the reply. "Did you wish to see me?" "I do. I'm Mr. James Gunmore, Secretary of the Eagle Park Aviation Association. I had some correspondence with you about a prize contest we are going to hold, I believe." "Oh, yes, I remember now," and the young inventor smiled pleasantly as he opened wider the door of his home. "Won't you come in? My father will be glad to see you. He is as much interested in airships as I am." And Tom led the way to the library, where the secretary of the Aviation Society was soon seated in a big, comfortable leather chair. "I thought we could do better, and perhaps come to some decision more quickly, if I came to see you, than if we corresponded," went on Mr. Gunmore. "I hope I haven't disturbed you at any of your inventions," and the secretary smiled at the youth. "No, I'm through for today," replied Tom. "I'm glad to see you. I thought at first it was my chum, Ned Newton. He generally runs over in the evening." "Our society, as I wrote you, Mr. Swift, is planning to hold a very large and important aviation meet at Eagle Park, which is a suburb of Westville, New York State. We expect to have all the prominent birdmen there to compete for prizes, and your name was mentioned. I wrote to you, as you doubtless recall, asking if you did not care to enter." "And I think I wrote you that my big aeroplane dirigible, the Red Cloud, was destroyed in Alaska during a recent trip we made to the caves of ice there, after gold," replied Tom. "Yes, you did," admitted Mr. Gunmore. "And while our committee was very sorry to hear that, we hoped you might have some other aircraft that you could enter at our meet. We want to make it as complete as possible, and we all feel that it would not be so unless we had a Swift aeroplane there." "It's very kind of you to say so," remarked Tom. "But since my big craft was destroyed, I really have nothing I could enter." "Haven't you any aeroplane of any kind? I made this trip especially to get you to enter. Haven't you anything in which you could compete for the prizes? There are several to be offered, some for distance flights, some for altitude, and the largest $10,000 for the speediest craft. $10,000 is the grand prize, to be awarded for the quickest flight on record." "I surely would like to try for that," said Tom. "But the only craft I have is a small monoplane, the Butterfly, I call it, and while it is very speedy, there have been such advances made in aeroplane construction since I made mine that I fear I would be distanced if I raced in her, and I wouldn't like that." "No," agreed Mr. Gunmore, "I suppose not. Still, I do wish we could induce you to enter. I don't mind telling you that we consider you a drawing card. Can't we induce you some way?" "I'm afraid not. I haven't any machine which—" "Look here," exclaimed the secretary eagerly. "Why can't you build a special aeroplane to enter in the next meet? You'll have plenty of time, as it doesn't come off for 3 months yet. We're only making the preliminary arrangements. It is now June, and the meet is scheduled for early in September. Couldn't you build a new and speedy airplane in that time?" Eagerly Mr. Gunmore waited for the answer. Tom Swift seemed to be considering it. There was an increased brightness in his eyes, and one could tell that he was thinking deeply. The secretary sought to clinch his argument. "I believe, from what I have heard of your work in the past, that you could build an aeroplane which would win the $10,000 prize," he went on. "I would be very glad if you did win it, and so I think would be the gentlemen associated with me in this enterprise. It would be fine to have a New York State youth win the grand prize. Come, Tom Swift, build a special craft and enter the contest." As he paused for an answer, footsteps were heard coming along the hall, and a moment later an aged gentleman opened the door of the library. "Oh, excuse me, Tom," he said. "I didn't know you had company," and he was about to withdraw. "Don't go, Father," said Tom. "You will be as much interested in this as I am. This is Mr. Gunmore of the Eagle Park Aviation Association. This is my father, Mr. Gunmore." "I've heard of you," spoke the secretary, as he shook hands with the aged inventor. "You and your son have made, in aeronautics, a name to be proud of." "And he wants us to go still farther, Dad," broke in the youth. "He wants me to build a specially speedy aeroplane and race for $10,000. Mused Mr. Swift. "Well, are you going to do it, Tom? Seems to me you ought to take a rest. You haven't been back from your gold hunting trip to Alaska long enough to more than catch your breath, and now—" "Oh, he doesn't have to go in this right away," eagerly explained Mr. Gunmore. "There is plenty of time to make a new craft." "Well, Tom can do as he likes about it," said his father. "Do you think you could build anything speedier than your butterfly, son?" "I think so, Father. That is, if you'll help me. I have a plan partly thought out, but it will take some time to finish it. Still, I might get it done in time." "I hope you'll try," exclaimed the secretary. "May I ask whether it would be a monoplane or a biplane?" "A monoplane, I think," answered Tom. "They are much more speedy than the double-deckers, and if I'm going to try for the $10,000, I need the fastest machine I can build." "We have the promise of one or two very fast monoplanes for the meet," went on Mr. Gunmore. "Would yours be of a new type?" "I think it would," was the reply from the young inventor. "In fact, I am thinking of making a smaller monoplane than any that have yet been constructed, and yet one that will carry 2 persons. The hardest work will be to make the engine light enough and still have it sufficiently powerful to make over 100 miles an hour if necessary." "100 miles an hour in a small monoplane? It isn't possible," cried the secretary. "I'll make better time than that," said Tom quietly, and with not a trace of boasting in his tones. "Then you'll enter the meet?" asked Mr. Gunmore eagerly. "Well, I'll think about it," promised Tom. "I'll let you know in a few days. Meanwhile, I'll be thinking out the details of my new craft. I have been going to build one ever since I got back, after having seen my Red Cloud crushed in the ice cave. Now I think I had better begin active work." "I hope you will soon let me know," resumed the secretary. "I'm going to put you down as a possible contestant for the $10,000 prize. That can do no harm, and I hope you win it. I trust—" He paused suddenly and listened. So did Tom Swift and his father, for they all distinctly heard stealthy footsteps under the open window of the library. "Someone is out there listening," said Tom in low tones. "Perhaps it's Eradicate Sampson," suggested Mr. Swift, referring to the eccentric colored man who was employed by the inventor and his son to help around the place. "Very likely it was Eradicate, Tom." "I don't think so," was the lad's answer. "He went to the village a while ago, and said he wouldn't be back until late tonight. He had to get some medicine for his mule, Boomerang, who is sick. No, it wasn't Eradicate, but someone was under that window trying to hear what we said." As he spoke in guarded tones, Tom went softly to the casement and looked out. He could observe nothing, as the night was dark, and the new moon, which had been shining, was now dimmed by cloud. "See anything?" asked Mr. Gunmore, as he advanced to Tom's side. "No," was the low answer. "I can't hear anything now, either." "I'll go speak to Mrs. Baggert, the housekeeper," volunteered Mr. Swift. "Perhaps it was she, or she may know something about it." He started from the room, and as he went, Tom noticed, with something of a start, that his father appeared older that night than he had ever looked before. There was a trace of pain on the face of the aged inventor, and his step was lagging. "I guess Dad needs a rest and doctoring up," thought the young inventor, as he turned the electric chandelier off by a button on the wall, in order to darken the room so that he might peer out to better advantage. "I think he's been working too hard on his wireless motor. I must get Dr. Gladby to come over and see Dad. But now I want to find out who that was under this window." Once more Tom looked out. The moon had emerged from behind a thin bank of clouds and gave a little light. "See anything?" asked Mr. Gunmore cautiously. "No," whispered the youth. For, it being a warm night, the windows were open top and bottom, a screen on the outside keeping out mosquitoes and other insects. "I can't see a thing," went on Tom, "but I'm sure—" He paused suddenly. As he spoke, there sounded a rustling in the shrubbery a little distance from the window. "There's something!" exclaimed Mr. Gunmore. "I see," answered the young inventor. Without another word he softly opened the screen, and then stooping down to get under the lower sash, for the windows in the library ran all the way to the floor, Tom dropped out of the casement upon the thick grass. As he did so, he was aware of a further movement in the bushes. They were violently agitated, and a second later a dark object sprang from them and sprinted along the path. "Here, who are you? Hold on!" cried the young inventor. But the figure never halted. Tom sprang forward, determined to see who it was, and if possible, capture him. "Hold on!" he cried again. There was no answer. Tom was a good runner, and in a few seconds he had gained on the fugitive, who could just be seen in the dim light from the crescent moon. "I got you!" cried Tom. But he was mistaken, for at that instant his foot caught on the outcropping root of a tree, and the young inventor went flat on his face. "Just my luck!" he cried. He was quickly on his feet again, and took after the fugitive. The latter glanced back, and, as it happened, Tom had a good look at his face. He almost came to a stop, so startled was he. "Andy Foger!" he exclaimed, as he recognized the bully who had always proved himself such an enemy of our hero. "Andy Foger, sneaking under my window to hear what I had to say about my new aeroplane. I wonder what his game can be. I'll soon find out." Tom was about to resume the chase when he lost sight of the figure. A moment later he heard the puffing of an automobile as someone cranked it up. "It's too late!" exclaimed Tom. "There he goes in his car." And knowing it would be useless to keep up the chase, the youth turned back toward his house. End of Chapter 1. Recording by Richard Kilmer, Rio Medina, Texas. Chapter 2 of Tom Swift and His Sky Racer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Tom Swift and His Sky Racer by Victor Appleton. Chapter 2. Mr. Swift is Ill. "Who was it?" asked Mr. Gunmore, as Tom again entered the library. "A friend of yours?" "Hardly a friend," replied Tom grimly. "It was a young fellow who has made lots of trouble for me in the past, and who lately, with his father, tried to get ahead of me and some friends of mine in locating a gold claim in Alaska. I don't know what he's up to now, but certainly it wasn't any good. He's got nerve, sneaking up under our windows." "What do you think was his object?" "It would be hard to say." "Can't you find him tomorrow and ask him?" "There's not much satisfaction in that. The less I have to do with Andy Foger, the better I'm satisfied. Well, perhaps it's just as well I fell and couldn't catch him. There would have been a fight, and I don't want to worry Dad any more than I can help. He hasn't been very well of late." "No, he doesn't look very strong," agreed the secretary. "But I hope he doesn't get sick, and I hope no bad consequences result from the eavesdropping of this Folger fellow." Tom started for the hall to get a brush with which to remove some of the dust gathered in his chase after Andy. As he opened the library door to go out, Mr. Swift came in. "I saw Mrs. Baggert, Tom," he said. "She wasn't out under the window, and as you said, Eradicate isn't about. His mule is in the barn, so it couldn't have been the animal straying around." "No, Dad. It was Andy Folger." "Andy Folger?" "Yes, I couldn't catch him. But you'd better go lie down, Father. It's getting late, and you look tired." "I am tired, Tom, and I think I'll go to bed. Have you finished your arrangements with Mr. Gunmore?" "Well, I guess we've gone as far as we can until I invent the new aeroplane," replied Tom with a smile. "Then you'll really enter the meet?" asked the secretary eagerly. "I think I will," decided Tom. "The prize of $10,000 is worth trying for, and besides that, I'll be glad to get to work again on a speedy craft. Yes, I'll enter the meet." "Good!" exclaimed Mr. Gunmore, shaking hands with the young inventor. "I didn't have my trip for nothing, then. I'll go back in the morning and report to the committee that I've been successful. I'm greatly obliged to you." He left the Swift home after refusing Tom's invitation to remain all night, and went to his hotel. Tom then insisted that his father retire. As for the young inventor, he was not satisfied with the result of his attempt to catch Andy Folger. He had no idea why the bully was hiding under the library window, but Tom surmised that some mischief might be afoot. Sam Sendecker or Pete Bailey, the two cronies of Andy, may still be around here trying to play some trick on me, mused Tom. "I think I'll have a look outside." And taking a stout cane from the umbrella rack, the youth sallied forth into the yard and extensive grounds surrounding his house. While he is thus looking for possible intruders, we will tell you a little more about him than has been possible since the call of the aviation secretary. Tom Swift lived with his father, Barton Swift, in the town of Shopton, New York State. The young man had followed in the footsteps of his parent, and was already an inventor of note. Their home was presided over by Mrs. Baggert, a housekeeper, since Mrs. Swift had been dead several years. In addition, there was Garrett Jackson, an engineer, who aided Tom and his father, and Eradicate Sampson, an odd-colored man, who, with his mule Boomerang, worked about the place. In the first volume of this series, entitled Tom Swift and His Motorcycle, here was related how he came to possess that machine. A certain Mr. Wakefield Damon, an eccentric gentleman, who was always blessing himself, or something about him, owned the cycle, but he came to grief on it and sold it to Tom very cheaply. Tom had a number of adventures on the wheel, and after having used the motor to save a valuable patent model from a gang of unscrupulous men, the lad acquired possession of a powerboat, in which he made several trips and took part in many exciting happenings. Some time later, in the company with John Sharp, an aeronaut, who Tom had rescued from Lake Carlopa after the airman had nearly lost his life in a burning balloon, the young inventor made a big airship called the Red Cloud, with Mr. Damon. Tom made several trips in this craft, as set forth in the book Tom Swift and His Airship. It was after this that Tom and his father built a submarine boat and went under the ocean for sunken treasure, and following that trip, Tom built a speedy electric runabout, and by a remarkable run-in that, with Mr. Damon, saved the bank from ruin, bringing gold in time to stave off a panic. Tom Swift and his wireless message told of the young inventor's plan to save the castaways of Earthquake Island, and how he accomplished it by constructing a wireless plant from the remains of the wrecked airship Whizzer. After Tom got back from Earthquake Island, he went with Mr. Barcoe Jenks, whom he met on the ill-fated bit of land, to discover the secret of the diamond makers. They found the mysterious men, but the trip was not entirely successful, for the mountain containing the cave where the diamonds were made was destroyed by a lightning shock, just as Mr. Parker, the celebrated scientist who accompanied the party, had said it would be. But his adventure in seeking to discover the secret of making precious stones did not satisfy Tom Swift, and when he and his friends got back from the mountains, they prepared to go to Alaska to search for gold in the caves of ice. They were almost defeated in their purpose by the actions of Andy Foger and his father, who, in an underhanded manner, got possession of a valuable map showing the location of the gold, and made a copy of the drawing. Then, when Tom and his friends set off in the Red Cloud, as related in Tom Swift in the Caves of Ice, the Folgers in another airship did likewise. But Tom and his party were first on the scene, and accomplished their purpose, though they had to fight the savage Indians. The airship was wrecked in a cave of ice that collapsed on it, and the survivors had desperate work getting away from the frozen north. Tom had been home all the following winter and spring, and had done little more than work on some small inventions, when a new turn was given his thoughts and energies by a visit from Mr. Gunmore, as narrated in the first chapter of the present volume. "Well, I guess no one is here," remarked the young inventor, as he completed the circuit of the grounds and walked slowly back toward the house. "I think I scared Andy off so that he won't come back right away. He had the laugh on me, though, when I stumbled and fell." As Tom proceeded, he heard someone approaching, around the path at the side of the house. "Who's there?" he called quickly, taking a firmer grasp of his stick. "It's me, Massa Swift," was the response. "I just come back from town. I got some peppermint for my mule, Boomerang. That's what I got." "Oh, it's you, is it, Rad?" asked the youth in easier tones. "That's who it am. Did you think it was someone else?" "I did," replied Tom. "Andy Folger has been sneaking around. Keep your eyes open for the rest of the night, Rad." "I will, Massa Tom." The youth went into the house, having left word with the engineer, Mr. Jackson, to be on the alert for anything suspicious. "And now I guess I'll go to bed and make an early start tomorrow morning, planning my new aeroplane," mused Tom. "I'm going to make the speediest craft of the air ever seen." As he started toward his room, Tom Swift heard the voice of the housekeeper calling to him. "Tom, oh Tom, come here quickly." "What's the matter?" he asked in vague alarm. "Something has happened to your father," was the startling reply. "He's fallen down and is unconscious. Come quickly, send for the doctor." Tom fairly ran toward his father's room. End of Chapter 2. Recording by Richard Kilmer, Rio Medina, Texas. Chapter 3 of Tom Swift and His Sky Racer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Tom Swift and His Sky Racer by Victor Appleton. Chapter 3. The Plans Disappear. Mr. Swift was lying on the floor where he had fallen in front of his bed as he was preparing to retire. There was no mark of injury upon him, and at first, as he knelt down at his father's side, Tom was at a loss to account for what had taken place. "How did it happen? When was it?" he asked of Mrs. Baggert, as he held up his father's head and noted that the aged man was breathing slightly. "I don't know what happened, Tom," answered the housekeeper, "but I heard him fall and ran upstairs, only to find him lying there, just like that. Then I called you. Hadn't you better have a doctor?" Yes, we'll need one at once. Send Eradicate. Tell him to run. Not to wait for his mule. Boomerang is too slow. Oh, no, the telephone, of course. Why didn't I think of that first? Please telephone for Dr. Gladby, Mrs. Braggart, and ask him to come as soon as possible. And then tell Garrett Jackson to step here. I'll have him help me get Father into bed." The housekeeper hastened to the instrument and was soon in communication with the physician, who promised to call at once. The engineer was summoned from another part of the house, and then Eradicate was aroused. Mrs. Baggert had the colored man help her get some kettles of hot water in readiness for possible use by the doctor. Mr. Jackson aided Tom to lift Mr. Swift up on the bed, and they got off some of his clothes. "I'll try to see if I can revive him with a little aromatic spirits of ammonia," decided Tom, as he noticed that his father was still unconscious. He hastened to prepare the strong spirits, while he was conscious of a feeling of fear and alarm mingled with sadness. Suppose his father should die? Tom could not bear to think of that. He would be left all alone, and how much he would miss the companionship and comradeship of his father none but himself knew. "Oh, I mustn't think he's going to die," exclaimed the youth, as he mixed the medicine. Mr. Swift feebly opened his eyes after Tom and Mr. Jackson had succeeded in forcing some of the ammonia between his lips. "Where am I? What happened?" asked the aged inventor faintly. "We don't know exactly," spoke Tom softly. "You are ill, Father. I've sent for the doctor. He'll fix you up. He'll be here soon." "Yes, I'm ill," murmured the aged man. "Something hurts me here," and he put his hand over his heart. Tom felt a nameless sense of fear. He wished now that he had insisted on his parent consulting a physician some time before, when Mr. Swift first complained of a minor ailment. Perhaps now it was too late. "Oh, when will that doctor come?" murmured Tom impatiently. Mrs. Braggart, who was nervously going in and out of the room, again went to the telephone. "He's on his way," the housekeeper reported. "His wife said he just started out in his automobile." Dr. Gladby hurried into the room a little later, and cast a quick look at Mr. Swift, who had again lapsed into unconsciousness. "Do you think he's going to die?" faltered Tom. He was no longer the self-reliant young inventor. He could meet danger bravely when it threatened himself alone, but when his father was stricken, he seemed to lose all courage. "Die? Nonsense!" exclaimed the doctor heartily. "He's not dead yet, at all events, and while there's life there's hope. I'll soon have him out of this spell." It was some little time, however, before Mr. Swift again opened his eyes, but he seemed to gain strength from the remedies which Dr. Gladby administered, and in about an hour the inventor could sit up. "But you must be careful," cautioned the physician. "Don't overdo yourself. I'll be in again in the morning. And now I'll leave you some medicine, to be taken every 2 hours." "Oh, I feel much better," said Mr. Swift, and his voice certainly seemed stronger. "I can't imagine what happened. I came upstairs after Tom had received a visit from the minister, and that's all I remember." "The minister, Father?" exclaimed Tom in great amazement. "The minister wasn't here this evening. That was Mr. Gunmore, the aviation secretary. Don't you remember?" "I don't remember any gentleman like that calling here tonight," Mr. Swift said blankly. "It was the minister, I'm sure, Tom." "The minister was here last night, Mr. Swift," said the housekeeper. "Was he? Why, it seems like tonight, and I came upstairs after talking to him, and then it all got black, and—" "There now, don't try to think," advised the doctor. "You'll be all right in the morning." "But I can't remember anything about the aviation man," protested Mr. Swift. "I never used to be that way, forgetting things. I don't like it." "Oh, it's just because you're tired," declared the physician. "It will all come back to you in the morning. I'll stop in and see you then." Now try to go to sleep." And he left the room. Tom followed him, Mrs. Baggert and Mr. Jackson remaining with the sick man. "What is the matter with my father, Dr. Gladby?" asked Tom earnestly, as the doctor prepared to take his departure. "Is it anything serious?" "Well," began the medical man, "I would not be doing my duty, Tom, if I did not tell you what it is. That is, it is comparatively serious, but it is curable, and I think we can bring him around. He has an affection of the heart that, while it is common enough, is sometimes fatal. But I do not think it will be so in your father's case. He has a fine constitution, and this would never have happened had he not been run down from overwork. That is the principal trouble. What he needs is rest, and then, with proper remedies, he will be as well as before." "But that strange lapse of memory, doctor?" "Oh, that is nothing. It is due to the fact that he has been using his brain too much. The brain protests and refuses to work until rested. Your father has been working rather hard of late, hasn't he?" "Yes, on a new wireless motor." "I thought so. Well, a good rest is what he needs, and then his mind and body will be in tune again. I'll be around in the morning." Tom was somewhat relieved by the doctor's words, but not very much so, and he spent an anxious night, getting up every 2 hours to administer the medicine. Toward morning, Mr. Swift fell into a heavy sleep and did not awaken for some time. "Oh, you're much better," declared Dr. Gladby when he saw his patient that day. "Yes, I feel better," admitted Mr. Swift. "And you can't remember about Mr. Gunmore calling?" asked Tom. The aged inventor shook his head with a puzzled air. "I can't remember at all," he said. "The minister is the last person I remember calling here." Tom looked worried, but the physician said it was a common feature of the disease from which Mr. Swift suffered, and would doubtless pass away. "And you don't remember how we talked about me building a speedy aeroplane and trying for the $10,000 prize?" asked Tom. "I can't remember a thing about it," said the inventor, with a puzzled shake of his head. "And I'm not going to try, at least not right away. But, Tom, if you're going to build a new aeroplane, I want to help you. I'll give you the benefit of my advice. I think my new form of motor can be used in it." Now, no inventions, at least not just yet," objected the physician. "You must have a good rest first, Mr. Swift, and get strong. Then you and Tom can build as many airships as you like." Mr. Swift felt so much better about 3 days later that he wanted to get right to work planning the airship that was to win the big prize, but the doctor would not hear of it. Tom, however, began to make rough sketches of what he had in mind, changing them from time to time. He also worked on a type of motor, very light, and modeled after one his father had recently patented. Then a new idea came to Tom in regard to the shape of his aeroplane, and he worked several days drawing the plans for it. It was a new idea in construction, and he believed it would give him the great speed he desired. "But I'd like Dad to see it," he said. "As soon as he's well enough, I'll go over it with him." That time came a week later, and with a complete set of the plans, embodying his latest ideas, Tom went into the library where his father was seated in an easy chair. Dr. Gladby had said it would not harm the aged inventor to do a little work. Tom spread the drawings out in front of his father, and began to explain them in detail. "I really think you have something great there, Tom," exclaimed Mr. Swift at length. "It is a very small monoplane, to be sure, but I think with the new principle you have introduced it will work. But if I were you, I'd shape those wing tips a little differently." "No, they're better that way," said Tom pleasantly, for he did not often disagree with his father. "I'll show you from a little model I have made. I'll get it right away." Anxious to demonstrate that he was right in his theory, Tom hurried from the library to get the model of which he had spoken. He left the roll of plans lying on a small table near where his father was seated. "There, you see, Dad," said the young inventor, as he re-entered the library a few minutes later. When you warp the wing tips in making a spiral ascent, it throws your tail wings out of plumb, and so—" Tom paused in some amazement, for Mr. Swift was lying back in his chair with his eyes closed. The lad started in alarm, laid aside his model, and sprang to his father's side. "He's had another one of those heart attacks," gasped Tom. He was just going to call Mrs. Baggert when Mr. Swift opened his eyes. He looked at Tom, and the lad could see that they were bright and did not show any signs of illness. "Well, I declare!" exclaimed the inventor. "I must have dozed off, Tom, while you were gone. That's what I did. I fell asleep." "Oh," said Tom, much relieved. "I was afraid you were ill again. Now in this model, as you will see by the plans, it is necessary—" He paused and looked over at the table where he had left the drawings. They were not there. "The plans, father!" Tom exclaimed. "The plans I left on the table. Where are they?" "I haven't touched them," was the answer. "They were on that table where you put them when I closed my eyes for a little nap. I forgot all about them. Are you sure they're missing?" "They're not here," and Tom gazed wildly about the room. "Where can they have gone?" "I wasn't out of my chair," said Mr. Swift. "I ought not to have gone to sleep, but—" Tom fairly jumped toward the long library window, the same one from which he had leaped to pursue Andy Foger. The casement was open, and Tom noted that the screen was also unhooked. It had been closed when he went to get the model. He was sure of that. "Look, Dad, see!" he exclaimed, as he picked up from the floor a small piece of paper. "What is it, Tom?" "A sheet on which I did some figuring. It's no good, but it was with the plans. It must have dropped out." "Do you mean that someone has been in here and taken the plans of your new aeroplane, Tom?" gasped his father. "That's just what I mean. They sneaked in here while you were dozing, took the plans, and jumped out of the window with them. On the way this paper fell out. It's the only clue we have. Stay here, Dad. I'm going to have a look." And Tom jumped from the library window and ran down the path after the unknown thief. End of Chapter 3. Recording by Richard Kilmer, Rio Medina, Texas. Chapter 4 of Tom Swift and His Sky Racer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Tom Swift and His Sky Racer by Victor Appleton. Chapter 4. Anxious Days. Peering on all sides as he dashed along the gravel walk, hoping to catch a glimpse of the unknown intruder in the garden or shrubbery, Tom sprinted on at top speed. Now and then he paused to listen, but no sound came to him to tell of someone in retreat before him. There was only silence. "Mighty queer," mused the youth. "Whoever it was, he couldn't have had more than a minute's start on me. No, not even half a minute, and yet they've disappeared as completely as though the ground had opened up and let them down. And the worst of it is that they've taken my plans with them." He turned about and retraced his steps, making a careful search. He saw no one until, turning a corner a little later, he met Eradicate Sampson. "You haven't seen any stranger around here just now, have you, Rad?" asked Tom anxiously. "No, indeedy, I hasn't, Massa Tom. What kind of stranger was him?" "That's just what I don't know, Rad. But someone sneaked into the library just now and took some of my plans while my father dozed off. I jumped out after him as soon as I could, but he has disappeared." "Maybe it were the man who done stowed himself away on your airship the time you went after the diamonds," suggested the colored man. "No, it couldn't have been him. If it was anybody, it was Andy Foger or some of his crowd. You didn't see Andy, did you, Rad?" "No, indeedy, but if I do, I sure will turn my mule Boomerang loose on him, and he won't take any more plans, not right off, Massa Tom." "No, I guess not. Well, I must get back to Dad, or he'll worry. Keep your eyes open, Rad, and if you see Andy Folger or anyone else around here, let me know. Just sing out for all you're worth." "Shall I call out, Master Tom, if I sees that blessin' man?" "You mean Mr. Damon?" "That's the one. The gentleman is always blessing of himself or his shoelaces, or something like that. Shall I sing out if I see him?" "Well, no, not exactly, Rad. Just show Mr. Damon up to the house. I'll be glad to see him again, though I don't fancy he'll call. He's off on a little trip and won't be back for a week. But watch out, Rad." And with that Tom turned toward the house, shaking his head over the puzzle of the missing plans. "Did you find anyone?" asked his father eagerly, as the young inventor entered the library. "No," was the gloomy answer. "There wasn't a sign of anyone." Tom went over to the window and looked about for clues. There was none that he could see, and a further examination of the ground under the window disclosed nothing. There was gravel beneath the casement, and this was not the best medium for retaining footprints, nor were the gravel walks any better. "Not a sign of anyone," murmured Tom. "Are you sure you didn't hear any noise, Dad, when you dozed off?" "Not a sound, Tom. In fact, it's rather unusual for me to go to sleep like that, but I suppose it's because of my illness. But I couldn't have been asleep long, not more than 2 minutes." "That's what I think. Yet in that time someone, who must have been on the watch, managed to get in here and take my plans for the new sky racer. I don't see how they got the wire screen open from the outside, though it fastens with a strong hook." "And was the screen open?" asked Mr. Swift. "Yes, it was unhooked. Either they pushed the wire in through the mesh, caught it under the hook, and pulled it up from the outside, or else the screen was opened from the inside." "I don't believe they could get inside to open the screen without some of us seeing them," spoke the older inventor. "More likely, Tom, it wasn't hooked, and they found it an easy matter to simply pull it open." "That's possible. I'll ask Mrs. Baggert if the screen was unhooked." But the housekeeper could not be certain on that point, and so that part of the investigation amounted to nothing. "It's too bad!" exclaimed Mr. Swift. "It's my fault for dozing off that way." "No, indeed it isn't," declared Tom stoutly. "Is the loss a serious one?" asked his father. "Have you no copy of the plans?" "Yes, I have a rough draft, from which I made the complete drawings, and I can easily make another set. But that isn't what worries me, the mere loss of the plans." "What is it then, Tom?" "The fact that whoever took them must know that they are plans for a sky racer that is to take part in the big meet. I have worked it out on a new principle, and it is not yet patented. Whoever stole my plans can make the same kind of sky racer that I intended to construct, and so stand as good a chance to win the prize of $10,000 as I will." "That certainly is too bad, Tom. I never thought of that. Do you suspect anyone?" "No one, unless it's Andy Folger. He's mean enough to do a thing like that, but I didn't think he'd have the nerve. However, I'll see if I can learn anything about him. He may have been sneaking around here, and if he has my plans, he'd ask nothing better than to make a sky racer and beat me." "Oh, Tom, I'm so sorry!" exclaimed Mr. Swift. I feel very bad about it." "There, never mind," spoke the lad, seeing that his father was looking ill again. "Don't think any more about it, Dad. I'll get back those plans. Come now, it's time for your medicine, and then you must lie down," for the aged inventor was looking tired and weak. Wearily he let Tom lead him to his room, and after seeing that the invalid was comfortable, Tom called up Dr. Gladby to have him come and see Mr. Swift. The doctor said his patient had been overdoing himself a little, and must rest more if he was to completely recover. Learning that his father was no worse, Tom set off to find Andy Folger. "I can't rest until I know whether or not he has my plans," he said to himself. "I don't want to make a speedy aeroplane, and find out at the last minute that Andy or some of his cronies have duplicated it. But Tom got little satisfaction from Andy Foger. When the bully was accused of having been around Tom's house, he denied it, and though the young inventor did not actually accuse him of taking the plans, he hinted at it. Andy muttered many indignant negatives, and called on some of his cronies to witness that at the time the plans were taken, he and they were some distance from the Swift home. So Tom was baffled, and though he did not believe the red-haired lad's denial, there was no way in which he could prove to the contrary. If he didn't take the plans, who did? Mused Tom. As the young inventor turned away after cross-questioning Andy, the bully called out, "You'll never win that $10,000. "What do you know about that?" demanded Tom quickly. "Oh, I know," sneered Andy. "There'll be bigger and better aeroplanes in that meet than you can make, and you'll never win the prize." "I suppose you heard about the affair by sneaking around under our windows and listening," said Tom. "Never mind how I know it, but I do," retorted the bully. "Well, I'll tell you one thing," said Tom calmly. "If you come around again, it won't be healthy for you. Look out for live wires if you try to do the listening act any more, Andy." And with that ominous warning, Tom turned away. "What do you suppose he means, Andy?" asked Pete Bailey, one of Andy's cronies. "It means he's got electrical wires strung around his place," declared Sam Snedecker, "and that we'll be shocked if we go up there. I'm not going." "Me either," added Pete, and Andy laughed uneasily. Tom heard what they said, and in the next few days he made himself busy by putting some heavy wires in and about the grounds, where they would show best. But the wires carried no current, and were only displayed to impress a sense of fear on Andy and his cronies, which purpose they served well. But it was like locking the stable door after the horse has been stolen, for with all the precautions he could take, Tom could not get back his plans, and he spent many anxious days seeking them. They seemed to have completely disappeared, however, and the young inventor decided there was nothing else to do but to draw new ones. He set to work on them, and in the meanwhile tried to learn whether or not Andy had the missing plans. He sought this information by stealth, and was aided by his chum, Ned Newton, but all to no purpose. Not the slightest trace or clue was discovered. End of Chapter 4. Recording by Richard Kilmer, Rio Medina, Texas. Chapter 5 of Tom Swift and His Sky Racer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Tom Swift and His Sky Racer by Victor Appleton. Chapter 5. Building the Sky Racer. What will you do if, after you have your little monoplane all constructed and get ready to race, you find that someone else has one exactly like it at the meet? Asked Ned Newton one day when he and Tom were out in the big workshop, talking things over. "What will you do, Tom?" "I don't see that there's anything I can do. I'll go on to the meet, of course, and trust to some improvements I have since brought out, and to what I know about aeroplanes, to help me win the race. I'll know, too, who stole my plans." "But it will be too late then." "Yes, too late, perhaps to stop them from using the drawings, but not too late to punish them for the theft. It is a great mystery, and I'll be on the anxious seat all the while, but it can't be helped." "When are you going to start work on the Sky Racer?" "Pretty soon now. I've got another set of plans made, and I've fixed them so that if they are stolen it won't do anyone any good." "How's that?" "I've put a whole lot of wrong figures and measurements, and scores of lines and curves that mean nothing. I have marked the right figures and lines by a secret mark, and when I work on them I'll use only the proper ones, but anyone else wouldn't know this. "Oh, I'll fool 'em this time." "I hope you do. Well, when you get that machine done I'd like to ride in it. Will it carry two, as your Butterfly does?" "Yes, only it will be much different, and of course it will go much faster. I'll give you a ride all right, Ned. Well, now I must get busy and see what material I need for what I hope will prove to be the speediest aeroplane in the world. That's going some. I must be leaving now. Don't forget your promise. I saw Mary Nestor on my way over here. She was asking for you. She said you must be very busy, for she hasn't seen you in some time." Was all Tom answered. But by the blush that mounted to his face it was evident that he was more interested in Mary Nestor than his mere exclamation indicated. When Ned had gone, Tom got out pencil and paper and was busily engaged in making some intricate calculations. He drew odd little sketches on the margin of the sheet, and then wrote out a list of things he would need to construct the new aeroplane. This finished, he went to Mr. Jackson, the engineer, and asked him to get the various things together and to have them put in the special shop where Tom did most of his work. "I want to get the machine together as soon as I can," he remarked to the engineer, "for it will need to be given a good tryout before I enter in the race, and I may find that I'll have to make several changes in it." Mr. Jackson promised to attend to the matter right away, and then Tom went in to talk to his father about the motor that was to whirl the propeller of the new aircraft. Mr. Swift had improved very much in the past few days, and though Dr. Gladby said he was far from being well, the physician declared there was no reason why he should not do some inventive work. He and Tom were in deep argument of gasoline motors, discussing the best manner of attaching the fins to the cylinders to make them air-cooled, when a voice sounded outside, the voice of Eradicate. "Hey, where you going?" demanded the colored man. "Where you going?" "Somebody's out in the garden," exclaimed Tom, jumping up suddenly. "Perhaps it's the same person who took the plans," suggested Mr. Swift. "Hold on there!" yelled Eradicate again. Then a voice replied, "Bless my insurance policy, what's the matter? Have there been burglars around? Why all these precautions? Bless my steam heater, don't you know me?" "Mr. Damon!" cried Tom, a look of pleasure coming over his face. "Mr. Damon is coming." "So I should judge," responded Mr. Swift with a smile. "I wonder why Eradicate didn't recognize him." They learned why a moment later, for on looking from the library window, Tom saw the colored man coming up the walk behind a well-dressed gentleman. "Why, my goodness, it's Mr. Damon!" exclaimed Eradicate. "I didn't know you, sir, with them whiskers on. I didn't, for a fact." "Bless my razor, I suppose it does make a difference," said the eccentric man. "Yes, my wife thought I'd look better and more sedate with a beard, so I grew one to please her. But I don't like it. A beard is too warm this kind of weather, Tom?" And Mr. Damon waved his hand to the young inventor and his father, who stood in the low windows of the library. "Entirely too warm, bless my fingernails, yes." "I agree with you," exclaimed Tom. "Come in. We're glad to see you." "I called to see if you aren't going on another trip to the North Pole, or somewhere in the Arctic regions," went on Mr. Damon. "Why?" inquired Tom. "Why, then this heavy beard of mine would come in handy. It would keep my throat and chin warm." And Mr. Damon ran his hands through his luxuriant whiskers. "No more northern trips right away," said Tom. "I'm about to build a speedy monoplane to take part in the big meet at Eagle Park." "Oh, yes, I heard about the meet," said Mr. Damon. "I'd like to be in that." "Well, I'm building a machine that will carry two," went on Tom, "and if you think you can stand a speed of 100 miles an hour or better, I'll let you come with me. There are some races where a passenger is allowed." "Have you got a razor?" asked Mr. Damon suddenly. "What for?" inquired Mr. Swift, wondering what the eccentric man was going to do. "Why, bless my shaving soap. I'm going to cut off my beard. If I go in a monoplane at 100 miles an hour, I don't want to make any more resistance to the wind than possible. And my whiskers would certainly hold back Tom's machine. Where's a razor? I'm going to shave at once. My wife won't mind when I tell her what it's for. Lend me a razor, please, Tom." "Oh, there's plenty of time," explained the lad with a laugh. "The race doesn't take place for over 2 months, but when it does, I think you would be better off without a beard." "I know it," said Mr. Damon simply. "I'll shave before we enter the contest, Tom. But now tell me all about it." Tom did so, retelling the story of the theft of the plans. Mr. Damon was for having Andy arrested at once, but Mr. Swift and his son pointed out that they had no evidence against him. "All we can do," said the young inventor, "is to keep watch on him, and see if he is building another aeroplane. He has all the facilities, and he may attempt to get ahead of me. If he enters a skycraft at the meet, I'll be plenty sure that he has made it from my stolen plans." "Bless my wingtips!" cried Mr. Damon. "But can't we do anything to stop him?" "I'm afraid not," answered Tom, and then he showed Mr. Damon his redrawn plans, and told in detail how he intended to construct the new aeroplane. The eccentric man remained as a guest of the Swift family that night, departing for his home the next day, and promising to be on hand as soon as Tom was ready to test his new craft, which would be in about a month. As the days passed, Tom, with the help of his father, whose health was slightly better, and with the aid of Mr. Jackson, began the work on the speedy little sky racer. As you boys are all more or less familiar with aeroplanes, we will not devote much space to the description of the new one Tom Swift made. We can describe it in general terms, but there were some features of it which Tom kept a secret from all save his father. Suffice it to say that Tom had decided to build a small aircraft of the single wing type, known as a monoplane. It was to be a cross between the Blériot and the Antoinette, with the general features of both, but with many changes or improvements. The wings were shaped somewhat like those of a hummingbird, which, as is well known, can at times vibrate its wings with such velocity that the most rapid camera lens cannot quite catch. And when it is known that a bullet in flight has been successfully photographed, the speed of the wings of the hummingbird can be better appreciated. The writer has seen a friend with a very rapid camera, which was used to snap automobiles in flight, attempt to take pictures of hummingbirds. He got the pictures all right, but the plate was blurred, showing that the wings had moved faster than the lens could throw them on the sensitive plate. Not that Tom intended the wings of his monoplane to vibrate, but he adopted that style as the best adapted to allow a rapid flight through the air, and the young inventor had determined that he would clip many minutes from the best record yet made. The body of his aircraft, between the forward wings and the rear ones, where the rudders were located, was shaped like a cigar, with side wings somewhat like the fin keels of the ocean liner to prevent a rolling motion. In addition, Tom had an ingenious device to automatically adapt his monoplane to sudden currents of air that might overturn it, and this device was one of the points which he kept secret. The motor, which was air-cooled, was located forward, and was just above the heads of the operator and the passenger who sat beside him. The single propeller, which was 10 feet in diameter, gave a minimum thrust of 1,000 pounds at 2,000 revolutions per minute. This was one feature wherein Tom's craft differed from others. The usual aeroplane propeller is 8 feet in diameter, and gives from 400 to 500 pounds of thrust at about 1,000 revolutions per minute, so it can be readily seen wherein Tom had an advantage. "But I'm building this for speed," he said to Mr. Jackson, "and I'm going to get it. We'll make 100 miles an hour without trouble." "I believe you," replied the engineer. "The motor you and your father have made is a wonder for lightness and power." In fact, the whole monoplane was so light and frail as to give one the idea of a rather large model instead of a real craft intended for service. But a careful inspection showed the great strength it had, for it was braced and guyed in a new way, and was as rigid as a steel trussed bridge. "What are you going to call her?" asked Mr. Jackson, about 2 weeks after they had started work on the craft, and when it had begun to assume shape and form. "I'm going to name her the Humming Bird," replied Tom. "She's little, but oh my!" "And I guess she'll bring home the prize," added the engineer. As the days went by and Tom, his father, and Mr. Jackson continued to work on the speedy craft, this hope grew in the heart of the young inventor. But he could not rid himself of worry as to the fate of the plans that had disappeared. Who had them? Was someone making a machine like his own from them? Tom wished he knew. End of Chapter 5. Recording by Richard Kilmer, Rio Medina, Texas.
Chapter 6 of Tom Swift and His Sky Racer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Tom Swift and His Sky Racer by Victor Appleton. Chapter 6, Andy Foger Will Contest. One afternoon, as Tom was working away in the shop on his Sky Racer, adjusting one of the rear rudders, and pausing now and then to admire the trim little craft, he heard someone approaching. Looking out through a small observation peephole made for this purpose, he saw Mrs. Baggert hurrying toward the building. "I wonder what's the matter," he said aloud, for there was a look of worriment on the lady's face. Tom threw open the door. "What is it, Mrs. Baggert?" he called. "Someone up at the house who wants to see me?" "No, it's your father," panted the housekeeper, for she was quite stout. "He is very ill again, and I can't seem to get Dr. Gladby on the telephone. Central says he doesn't answer." "My father worse!" cried Tom in alarm, dropping his tools and hurrying from the shop. "Where's Eradicate? Send him for the doctor. Perhaps the wires are broken. If he can't locate Dr. Gladby, get Dr. Kurtz. We must have someone. Here, Rad? Where are you?" he called, raising his voice. "Here I be," answered the colored man, coming from the direction of the garden, which he had been weeding. "Get out your mule, and go for Dr. Gladby. If he isn't home, get Dr. Kurtz. Hurry, Rad!" "I's mighty sorry, Massa Tom," answered the colored man, "but I can't hurry, nohow." "Why not?" "Because Boomerang done gone lame, and he won't run. I'll go myself, but I can't take dat air mule." "Never mind. I'll go in the Butterfly," decided Tom quickly. "I'll run up to the house and see how Dad is, and while I'm gone, Rad, you get out the Butterfly. I can make the trip in that. If Dr. Kurtz had a phone I could get him, but he lives over on the back road, where there isn't a line. Hurry, Rad." "Yes, sah, Massa Tom, I'll hurry." The colored man knew how to get the monoplane in shape for a flight, as he had often done it. Tom found his father in no immediate danger, but Mr. Swift had had a slight recurrence of his heart trouble, and it was thought best to have a doctor. So Tom started off in his aircraft, rising swiftly above the housetop, and sailed off toward the old-fashioned residence of Dr. Kurtz, a sturdy, elderly German physician, who sometimes attended Mr. Swift. Tom decided that as long as Dr. Gladby did not answer his phone, He could not be at home, and this, he learned later, was the case, the physician being in a distant town on a consultation. "My, this butterfly seems big and clumsy beside my hummingbird," mused Tom as he slid along through the air, now flying high and now low, merely for practice. "This machine can go, but wait till I have my new one in the air. Then I'll show 'em what speed is." He was soon at the physician's house, and found him in. "Won't you ride back with me in the monoplane?" asked Tom. "I'm anxious to have you see Dad as soon as you can." "What? Me drust myself in one of dem airships? I dinks not!" exclaimed Dr. Kurtz ponderously. "Why, I would not effen ride in an automobile, yet, so why should I go in one contrivance what is effen more dangerous? No, I gomes to your father in der carriage, mit mein old Dobbin horse. Dot will not drop me to der ground, or run me up a tree, yet. What?" "Very well," said Tom, "only hurry, please." The young inventor, in his airship, reached home some time before the slow-going doctor got there in his carriage. Mr. Swift was no worse, Tom was glad to find, though he was evidently quite ill. "So, we must take good care of him," said the doctor, when he had examined the patient. "Dr. Gladby he has done much for him, und I can do little more. You must take care of yourself, Herr Swift, or you will. But then, what is der use of being gloomy-minded? I'm sure you will go more easy, und not work so much." "I haven't worked much," replied the aged inventor. "I have only been helping my son on the new airship." "Then dot must stop," insisted the doctor. "You must haf complete rest. Dot's it. Complete rest." "We'll do just as you say, doctor," said Tom. "We'll give up the aeroplane matters, Dad, and go away, you and I, where we can't see a blueprint or a pattern, or hear the sound of machinery. We'll cut it all out." "Dot would be good," said Dr. Kurtz ponderously. "No, I couldn't think of it," answered Mr. Swift. "I want you to go in that race, Tom, and win." "But I'll not do it, Dad, if you're going to be ill." "He is ill now," interrupted the doctor. "Very ill, Dom Swift." "That settles it. I don't go in the race. You and I'll go away, Dad, to California, or up in Canada. We'll travel for your health." "No, no," insisted the old inventor gently. "I will be all right. Most of the work on the monoplane is done now, isn't it, Tom?" "Yes, Dad." "Then you go on, and finish it. You and Mr. Jackson can do it without me now. I'll take a rest, Doctor, but I want my son to enter that race, and, what's more, I want him to win." "Well, if you don't work, dot is all I ask. I must forbid you to do any more. Mit Dom, dot is different. He is young und strong, und he can work. But you, not, Herr Swift, or I doctor you no more." And the physician shook his big head. "Very well. I'll agree to that if Tom will promise to enter the race," said the inventor. "I will," said Tom. The physician took his leave shortly after that, the medicine he gave to Mr. Swift somewhat relieving him. Then the young inventor, who felt in a little better spirits, went back to his workshop. "Poor Dad," he mused. "He thinks more of me and this aeroplane than he does of himself. Well, I will go in the race, and yes, I'll win." And Tom looked very determined. He was about to resume work on his craft when something about the way one of the forward planes was tilted attracted his attention. "I never left it that way," mused Tom. "Someone has been in here. I wonder if it was Mr. Jackson." Tom stepped to the door and called for Eradicate. The colored man came from the direction of the garden, which he was still weeding. "Has Mr. Jackson been around, Rad?" asked the lad. "No, sah. I ain't seed him." "Have you been in here, looking at the Hummingbird?" "No, Massa Tom. I nebber goes in dere, lessen as how yo is dere. Dem's yo' orders." "That's so, Rad. I might have known you wouldn't go in. But did you see anyone enter the shop?" "Not a pusson, sah." "Have you been here all the while?" "All but jes' a few minutes, when I went to de barn to put some liniment on Boomerang's so foot." Someone might have slipped in here while I was away," mused Tom. "I ought to have locked the doors, but I was in a hurry. This thing is getting on my nerves. I wonder if it's Andy Foger, or someone else, who is after my secret." He made a hasty examination of the shop, but could discover nothing more wrong, except that one of the planes of the Hummingbird had been shifted. "It looks as if they were trying to see how it was fastened on, and how it worked," mused Tom. "But my plans haven't been touched, and no damage has been done. Only I don't like to think that people have been in here. They may have stolen some of my ideas. I must keep this place locked night and day after this." Tom spent a busy week in making improvements on his craft. Mr. Swift was doing well, and after a consultation by Dr. Kurtz and Dr. Gladby it was decided to adopt a new style of treatment. In the meanwhile, Mr. Swift kept his promise, and did no work. He sat in his easy chair, out in the garden, and dozed away, while Tom visited him frequently to see if he needed anything. "Poor old Dad," mused the young inventor. "I hope he is well enough to come and see me try for the $10,000 prize and win it. I hope I do, but if someone builds, from my stolen plans, a machine on this model, I'll have my work cut out for me." And he gazed with pride on the Hummingbird. For the past 2 weeks Tom had seen nothing of Andy Foger. The red-haired bully seemed to have dropped out of sight, and even his cronies, Sam Snedeker and Pete Bailey, did not know where he had gone. "I hope he has gone for good," said Ned Newton, who lived near Andy. "He's an infernal nuisance. I wish he'd never come back to Shopton." But Andy was destined to come back. One day, when Tom was busy installing a wireless apparatus on his new aeroplane, he heard Eradicate hurrying up the path that led to the shop. "I wonder if Dad is worse," thought Tom, that always being his first idea when he knew a summons was coming for him. Quickly he opened the door. "Someone's comin' out to see you, Massa Tom," said the colored man. "Who is it?" asked the lad, taking the precaution to put his precious plans out of sight. "I dunno, sah, but yo' father knows him, an' he said fo' me to come out heah, ahead ob de gen'man, an' tell yo' he were comin'. He'll be right heah." "Oh, well, if Dad knows him, it's all right. Let him come, Rad." "Yes, sah. Heah he comes." And the colored man pointed to a figure advancing down the gravel path. Tom watched the stranger curiously. There was something familiar about him, and Tom was sure he had met him before, yet he could not seem to place him. "How are you, Tom Swift?" greeted the newcomer pleasantly. "I guess you've forgotten me, haven't you?" He held out his hand, which Tom took. "Don't know me?" Do you?" he went on. "Well, I'm afraid I've forgotten your name," admitted the lad, just a bit embarrassed. "But your face is familiar, somehow, and yet it isn't." "I've shaved off my mustache," went on the other. "That makes a difference. But you haven't forgotten John Sharp, the balloonist, whom you rescued from Lake Carlopa, and who helped you build the Red Cloud? You haven't forgotten John Sharp, have you, Tom?" "Well, I should say not!" cried the lad heartily. "I'm real glad to see you. What are you doing around here? Come in. I've got something to show you," and he motioned to the shop where the Humming Bird was housed. "Oh, I know what it is," said the veteran balloonist. "You do?" "Yes. It's your new aeroplane. In fact, I came to see you about it." "To see me about it?" "Yes, I'm one of the committee of arrangements for the meet to be held at Eagle Park, where I understand you are going to contest. I came to see how near you were ready, and to get you to make a formal entry of your machine. Mr. Gunmore sent me." "Oh, so you're in with them now, eh?" asked Tom. "Well, I'm glad to know I've got a friend on the committee. Yes, my machine is getting along very well. I'll soon be ready for a trial flight. Come in and look at it. I think it's a bird. A regular hummingbird." And Tom laughed. "It certainly is something new," admitted Mr. Sharp as his eyes took in the details of the trim little craft. "By the way, Shopton is going to be well represented at the meet." "How is that? I thought I was the only one around here to enter an aeroplane." "No. We have just received an entry from Andy Foger." "From Andy Foger!" gasped Tom. "Is he going to try to win some of the prizes?" "He's entered for the big one, the $10,000 prize," replied the balloonist. "He has made formal application to be allowed to compete, and we have to accept anyone who applies. Why, do you object to him, Tom?" "Object to him? Mr. Sharp, let me tell you something. Some time ago a set of plans of my machine here were stolen from my house. I suspected Andy Foger of taking them, but I could get no proof. Now you say he is building a machine to compete for the big prize. Do you happen to know what style it is?" "It's a small monoplane, something like the Antoinette," his application states, though he may change it later." "Then he's stolen my ideas, and is making a craft like this!" exclaimed Tom, as he sank upon a bench, and gazed from the balloonist to the Humming Bird, and back to Mr. Sharp again. "Andy Foger is trying to beat me with my own machine!" Chapter 6